Welcome back to Boss Economics World, folks. The channel where we slice through the economic baloney, expose government gaffes, and call out the clowns running the circus. I'm your host, the guy who's allergic to bad policy, and today, we've got a doozy of a story that's hotter than a central bank printing press in hyperinflation mode. Buckle up, because we're diving headfirst into the US-EU trade war fiasco, where tariffs are flying, economies are frying, and governments on both sides of the Atlantic are proving, yet again, they couldn't manage a lemonade stand, let alone a global economy. Alright, let's set the stage. The European Union is gearing up to slap retaliatory tariffs on US imports, including Boeing aircraft, if President Donald Trump follows through on his threat to impose a baseline 10% tariff on EU goods, potentially ballooning to a jaw-dropping 50% on nearly all EU exports by July 9, 2025. The EU's industry chief, Stefan Sejourne, told Bloomberg News, "We will need to retaliate and rebalance in some key sectors if the US insists on an asymmetrical deal." Translation: if Trump plays hardball, the EU's ready to swing back, and we're all stuck watching this economic cage match. Now, if you're a regular viewer of Boss Economics World, you know we don't just scratch the surface, we dig deep, exposing the rot beneath the headlines. This isn't just a petty tariff spat, it's a textbook example of government mismanagement threatening to tank global trade, crater industries, and send us all spiraling into a recessionary abyss. And guess what? The data backs us up, the hypocrisy is glaring, and the stakes are sky high. So, let's break this down, layer by layer, from the surface nonsense to the core economic carnage. First up, let's talk about the collateral damage. The EU is already prepping tariffs on 21 billion euros of US goods, targeting politically sensitive states, think soybeans from Louisiana, poultry, motorcycles, and more. And if Trump's reciprocal levies escalate, the EU's got a hit list ready for 95 billion euros of American products, from pharmaceuticals to semiconductors. Meanwhile, the US is hammering European automobiles, steel, aluminum, and even eyeing commercial aircraft. This is a full-on economic slugfest, and the casualties are piling up. Take the aviation sector, for instance. The EU's Sejourne is whining that Airbus can't face unfair competition from Boeing if the US slaps a 10% tariff on European planes. Boo-hoo, right? But here's the kicker, Boeing's already getting crushed, not by tariffs, but by its own mismanagement and safety scandals. According to a 2024 Federal Aviation Administration report, Boeing's production quality issues have cost the company over $1.5 billion in fines and lawsuits, while delivery delays have slashed its market share by 12% since 2022. Now, Trump's tariffs might just be the knockout punch, but let's not pretend the EU's hands are clean. Airbus has its own history of subsidies and WTO violations, racking up 8 billion euros in penalties over the past decade. And it's not just planes. The U.S. automotive sector is bracing for a beating, with the Alliance for Automotive Innovation estimating that a 10% EU retaliatory tariff could cost American carmakers $7 billion annually in lost exports. Meanwhile, European automakers like BMW and Volkswagen, already reeling from a 15% drop in U.S. sales in 2024, per Autodata Corp., are staring down the barrel of Trump's automotive duties. This is what happens when governments play economic chicken, industries crash, jobs vanish, and consumers get stuck with higher prices. Speaking of which, here's where it gets personal, folks. Tariffs aren't just a corporate problem, they're a you problem. When governments start slapping duties on imports, prices go up, and guess who pays the bill? You, me, and every poor sap trying to buy a car, a phone, or a bottle of French wine. According to the Peterson Institute for International Economics, Trump's first round of tariffs in 2018-2019 cost American consumers $40 billion annually in higher prices. And that was just the appetizer. Today's proposed 50% tariffs could triple that hit, adding $120 billion to consumer costs, or roughly $900 per household, per a 2025 study by the National Bureau of Economic Research. But wait, there's more. These tariffs are pouring fuel on the inflation fire at a time when central banks are already struggling to tame it. In the US, inflation hit 6.2% in 2024, the highest in 15 years, per the Bureau of Labor Statistics. In the EU, it's even worse. Eurostat reported a 7.1% rate in June 2025, driven by supply chain disruptions and energy costs. Now, throw in a trade war, and you've got a recipe for double-digit inflation, stagflation, and a whole lot of misery. And who do we have to thank for this? Governments on both sides of the Atlantic, too busy flexing their nationalist muscles to notice the economic dumpster fire they're starting. Now, let's zoom out to the bigger picture. This US-EU spat isn't happening in a vacuum, it's part of a broader assault on the global trade system. Trump's demands, like fish export quotas that violate WTO rules, are just the tip of the iceberg. The US has already paralyzed the WTO's dispute settlement system by blocking judge appointments, leaving it powerless to enforce trade agreements. And the EU? Don't let their sanctimonious rhetoric fool you, they've been gaming the system for years, funneling €200 billion in illegal subsidies to Airbus and other national champions, per a 2024 WTO ruling. Here's the scary part, global trade volumes are already shrinking. The World Trade Organization reported a 3.2% decline in merchandise trade in 2024, the worst drop since the 2008 financial crisis. And with the US and EU, the world's two largest economies, locked in a tariff tit-for-tat, that decline could accelerate to 5% in 2025, per a forecast by the International Monetary Fund. That's not just a statistic, folks, that's millions of jobs, billions in GDP, and entire industries wiped out, all because our so-called leaders can't stop posturing. And now, we get to the heart of the matter, the root of all this chaos, government mismanagement. Let's start with Trump. His America First tariff strategy is a masterclass in economic illiteracy. Tariffs don't bring jobs back, they destroy them. A 2024 study by the Federal Reserve found that Trump's 2018 tariffs led to a net loss of 142,000 U.S. jobs, mostly in manufacturing, as higher costs crushed small businesses. And his obsession with trade deficits? Pure nonsense. The U.S. trade deficit with the EU hit $202 billion in 2024, per the U.S. Census Bureau, but economists agree that deficits are driven by macroeconomic factors like savings rates and currency values, not trade deals. Trump's tariffs are just a political stunt, not an economic strategy. But don't let the EU off the hook. They're sanctimonious, we're just defending ourselves, routine is laughable. The EU's trade surplus with the US, Euro 179 billion in 2024, per Eurostat, is built on a foundation of protectionist policies, from agricultural subsidies to discriminatory regulations. And their retaliation strategy? It's not about rebalancing, it's about punishing American workers to score political points. Just look at their targeted tariffs on soybeans and poultry, designed to hurt red states and pressure Republican lawmakers. This isn't economic policy, it's a geopolitical chess game, and we're all pawns. Here's the scariest part, folks, this trade war is pushing us toward a global recession, and our governments are too busy flexing to notice. The IMF slashed its 2025 global growth forecast to 2.1% in June, citing escalating trade tensions as the primary risk. In the US, the Conference Board's leading economic index has been flashing red for 6 months, signaling a 65% chance of recession by mid-2026. And in the EU, the European Central Bank warned that a full-blown trade war could shave 1.5% off Eurozone GDP, pushing unemployment to 10%, levels not seen since the 2012 debt crisis. And who's to blame? You guessed it, governments. Trump's reckless tariffs, the EU's petty retaliation, and both sides' refusal to compromise are a masterclass in how to tank an economy. This isn't leadership, it's economic vandalism. And the worst part? They're doing it all under the guise of protecting us, when in reality, they're just protecting their own political hides. So, there you have it, folks, a trade war that's hammering industries, jacking up prices, gutting global trade, and flirting with recession, all thanks to government mismanagement on an epic scale. Here at Boss Economics World, we don't just report the news, we call out the culprits. Trump, the EU, and their legions of bureaucrats need to stop treating the global economy like their personal sandbox and start acting like adults. Because if they don't, we're all going to pay the price. What do you think, viewers? Are tariffs the answer, or are they just another government screw-up? Drop your thoughts in the comments, smash that like button if you're fed up with economic clownery, and subscribe for more no-nonsense takes on the financial fiasco screwing us all. Until next time, stay sharp, stay skeptical, and remember, when governments meddle, economies crumble. This is Boss Economics World, signing off.